100 years before this Rangers Odyssey started, the face of football as we know it was created. In September 1888, the Football League began. Frustrated by the limitations of both cup football and test matches and exasperated by friendlies where some teams simply wouldn't show up, the league system was created, with each club playing one another home and away, and so the perfect measurement in football was born. Consistency over caprice, the need to compete over 36 games and not just a handful, where a title is determined by the events that happen over 3,000 minutes and not just an isolated incident in one. At its best, it is the greatest kind of sporting tale, one with ebb and flow, jeopardy and joy, long periods of calm, and then a run that can derail to disaster or power towards victory. The final 6 months of the 9-in-a-row saga were fittingly similar to the first 6, a period of brilliant form and style that opened up a healthy lead and then a grim scrap to hold on. The 9th title was picked up in May, but it was won over the course of this winter. I am Martyn Ramsey. This is Dominant, part 3 of our series on 96-97 Destiny. You may pick up that I'm slightly under the weather this week. Pretty apt, given some of the things we're going to talk about this episode. I'm joined by the two money men, which again is pretty appropriate. Andy McGowan, how are we, Andrew?
I'm very good, Martin. I didn't notice you weren't under the weather. Your voice just sounded even more gravitas.
Well,
even possible.
That's good to know. And from Athens, it's John Cowden. Good evening, John.
Good evening. Glad to see you taking the method acting to another level.
I do everything for this show. That November win that we talked about last week, Randy and Alan talked about last week, it was famous, not quite as famous as that one in November 1989, the Mo Johnson thing that really sent Celtic into a tailspin, but still significant nonetheless. Celtic wouldn't play for another 2 weeks. Their first game was against Hearts on the 30th of November. Another 2-2 draw. Incredible how many 2-2 draws we've got here, which saw Paulo Di Canio sent off after he had scored to put Celtic level. That was Celtic's 10th red card of the season. It wasn't even December yet. Tommy Burns refused to accept that the hysteria around 9-0, which he had helped stoke, was this sudden cause for all this indiscipline. Celtic were the fair play winners the previous year. He did accept that, Di Canio would get a bit caught up in it, and it was a moment of madness, but he saw me sent from the tunnel a fortnight ago. If Celtic had won, going back level again and ahead on goal difference puts the pressure right back on Rangers. Got to go to Pittodrie on the Sunday live on STV. Who knows? Rangers were superb in Aberdeen. Davy Robertson, Brian Laudrup and Charlie Miller all on the score sheet in a 3-0 win. And then Celtic succumbed even worse at a late winner at Fir Park. They lost 2-1 on exactly the kind of day that fatalistic fans point to as just evidence that this isn't going to happen. They lose the last minute winner at Fir Park. Rangers are at home to Hibs. We are behind twice. Keith Wright and then Darren Jackson, who was actually very good that day, putting Hibs 1-0 and 2-1 in front, and Ian Ferguson, pile driver, got his level. And the Rangers support, 2-1 down, baying for blood. It really was this. The pressure on this season, I keep coming back to it, is pretty much intolerable. McCoist, 2 goals in 6 minutes, relieves it. Laudrup gets a fourth, Hibs get one back, but it's not enough. Celtic were top of the table a few weeks ago. A home game with Rangers to come, carrying all that momentum, Andy. Now they're 8 points behind. The weather's going to intervene again, so they're not going to play for another 2 weeks before they come to Ibrox for the Old Firm game. It's so these momentum changing Old Firm games. We sometimes shake them off and say, well, it's just one game or 36 games, etc. But they can have an impact, and they did.
Well, I think even now we see that it's not just what happens on the park, it's the whole mood around the club and the support and the mood music. And, we're talking about a pre-Twitter era. I think it's amplified nowadays because it's just incessant, because everybody is telling their thoughts every minute, every day on Twitter or Facebook or social media. But here it's different because it's in the newspapers and it's on the phone-ins. So if you, in this season especially, any negativity, any positivity is amplified 10 times. And this is probably the thing that we don't factor in. Or we do factor it in, but we don't probably realise it's more than just the 3 points there. It's also the mood music around the club, and the momentum, as you say, Martyn, is absolutely, that is obvious, but it's very, very hard to recover from a setback in this season because of the pressure it's on. I mean, you're talking about Celtic's discipline. I don't think that happens in a normal season. It's the pressure that's causing that to happen. So it's making strange things happen.
The indiscipline is something else, John. I mean, really, again, this was a well-drilled, well-ordered. They never had the belief, of course. Rangers undefeated in 6 the season before, but they were the best-behaved team in the league. And it just goes to shit. And it goes to shit from the opening day. Alan Stubbs gets sent off at Pittodrie in that first day. Do not tell me that Burns has not spent the whole summer, as he said to Jim White, telling them, we've got to win it.
If there's a manager that's ill-equipped to be an Old Firm manager for this season, it's him. And it feeds these players. It's obvious. And the combination of Burns and Di Canio is just a disaster waiting to happen with the two of them. And it's just very Celtic. I know I'm far away, but there is a rhythm to the whole thing in that we get ahead, get complacent, and they're like this stray dog that's chasing a car. And when the car stops and they get close to it, they don't actually know what to do. And this is a recurring theme all the way up. They can get close, but as soon as they do, they don't know what to do. And they really struggle, and they blow it, and it explodes. And you do wonder what would happen if they had a calmer manager. But to be honest, I don't think they've got a calm team. And they certainly don't have a team that's equivalent to ours. It's more our complacency. And I would say our fans are so highly strung at this point because it's so close yet so far. And as Andy says, it's just as well there's no social media at this point, because who knows what that would have done to psyche and everything else. At least back then it was only on the back on all pages of the papers and in the pubs and in the buses,
and in the open line, which was in its time appointment listening on the way back. It's not 24/7, absolutely not, but it is concentrated. I mean, it was you listened to that on the way home. You did.
It was a collective experience, Martyn, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's like going to the cinema, watching a programme on the telly when everybody else is watching it, everybody's listening to it. You kind of listen back. It's live. And
interestingly, our friend Jerry McNee, who was part of the Radio Clyde team that I was going to say created it. It was an American sporting product that they borrowed, but Radio Clyde, fair enough to them, they made their name off the back of that, really, in the late 70s. And just around this time he quits. So it's just maniacs. I mean, it really is. It used to be witty and used to have some kind of level of discussion, and now it is just dribbling, frothing nutcases. And I've got no time for it, because this season really is boiling over. Rangers have that opportunity, put scoreboard pressure, with Celtic not playing again until maybe just before they come to Ibrox. Actually, they get 2 weeks off because of the weather. And we spun that first chance, maybe that complacency that John talked about up at Tannadice. We were pretty poor, didn't really get going. It was only when Richard Gough diverted the ball into his own net with just under 20 minutes remaining that there was any sense of urgency. Incredibly, and this gets forgotten about, Eric Bo Anderson possibly outdoes Peter Van Vossen in the mistakes. He's stretching right enough, but he's about 2 or 3 yards out and he still manages to put the ball over. There's a chance to extend. In theory, it's been cut back to 5. Someone in Follow wants them all fined and the money given to Cash for Kids. And it's, are Rangers just as bad? Is this winter going to have all the spills as well as thrills? Well, the answer was fairly emphatic. Rangers won 7 league games in succession. and in so doing effectively made their grip on this title too secure to ultimately dislodge. A couple of regulation home wins, Kilmarnock and Dunfermline, meant that the gap was 14 points, albeit with 3 games more, by the time the two sides played again on the same day. Celtic ground out a 1-0 win at home to Dundee United and prayed that the Rangers found the trip to Tynecastle as tricky as they seemed to do around this time, John, but we absolutely didn't. There were times when it was men against boys out there today. Bemoan Jim Jeffries, it was a mauling 4-1. David Robertson doing the kind of things that Gascoigne and Laudrup did before Gascoigne and Laudrup did the kind of things that they did in the second half. Alberts was selected as a new penalty man after Laudrup's mishap and Gascoigne's mishap, even though he did actually miss a second effort. But we won 4-1 just before Christmas, John. Again, just thinking of the claustrophobia and the pressure and everything else, this is a game that's, tricky. Hearts have made life difficult for us last season, of course. This was absolutely superb.
Yeah, it was. But I also think I go back and I do think our better performances are when this team at this point are under pressure. It's their worst performances is when they think it's done and we're running away with it. And yeah, the expectation, there is a degree of pressure, Celtic win. But that's what happened. When they won, we would win afterwards. And if they lost, odds on we might draw. But the opposite would happen. If we won, they might slip up because the pressure was on them. But if we dropped points, inevitably they did the next time they played. They only strung together runs when they were so far behind they were needing snookers, it felt like. Whereas we put the foot in the accelerator as we felt someone breathing down our neck. And we did put in some stunning performances. I mean, we've been past Pittodrie, and we did it up there. We've gone Tynecastle. Tannadice is... But, we're grinding out, but there's some flamboyant performance. We're scoring loads of goals around now. Just... at a time when it seems to have dried up across the city. You look at the league table just around the Old Firm game before it, and I think it's pretty level, and then suddenly we have seemed to have whacked in about 20 goals for the loss of about 1 or 2. It's just lovely stuff from us. Is it really a surprise? I think maybe us as fans kind of subconsciously get used to, well, it's December, it's cold, it's wet, we're going to start playing.
We really do, though. I mean, this seems like a very Walter thing, and it would be, I think, the same when he came back. We do kick into gear. We know that the winter is where so much is decided. Fast forward a year later, and sadly, similar would be true, even though we had our moments there as well. But it's a very Walter Smith thing to just find that gear and really, really go to town. The Dundee United game just been one of those nights.
So I think it's concentrated focus at the points that matter. I mean, everybody at Rangers, including the fans, knew that, for example, the Christmas period, both sides of Christmas were super important. So I suppose that's the winter, isn't it?
Traditionally,
You've got when the going gets tough, we get going. That is basically what happened all through 9 in a row. Was that there was that's why we're champions. That song was kind of epitomised by that performance at Tynecastle, because we just picked it up at the right time, and it was more than a result. It was sending a message, because, as you say, Martyn, Celtic get one eye looking over their shoulder at us, saying, they might trip up there. And we totally blow them away, and not only blow them away with a great performance with great goals. So it's all in the psychology there for me, and that you're sending a message to the opposition, and that you can get close, but we're just going to get away from you, and that it's got to have an impact on the opposition, individually and collectively.
4 more goals on Boxing Day, home to Wraith Rovers. Eric Anderson getting a hat-trick, playing himself into a bit of form, timely as it would turn out. And to be fair to Celtic, then Boxing Night, I suppose it would be called, they were up at Pittodrie and they were 1-0 down. They came back, they won 2-1, Paulo Di Canio getting a late goal that at least breathe some life back into their challenge. Then it was Rangers' turn to be frustrated by the weather. Game called off at Rugby Park. Celtic eased past Dunfermline to make a wee bit of inroad into that gap, which now stood at 11 points, with Rangers playing 2 more games before the two met at Ibrox for the latest do or die clash.
Albert's gone here with a genuine reputation as a set-piece specialist. And Celtic's wall is 5 strong. But Alberts gets it through! The hammer has torn Celtic apart.
Well, you won't see many free kicks hit any harder than that. That was awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Looks like Hannah's gone into the back line.
It has, yeah.
Well, here's Alberts, and here's Anderson! Rangers back in front, 7 minutes to go. Suicide for Celtic. There's another break on here. Can Rangers really wrap it up? It's Eric Boe Anderson again. A sensational appearance from the substitute.
All right, gents. Some thought this would be ideal. You just get a wee game off. We'll reschedule that another time. You get a whole week to prepare. It turned into a bit of a nightmare because flu ripped through this Rangers dressing room. Richard Gough, Brian Laudrup were out. They couldn't get out of their bed. Gascoigne, Gorham, David Robertson, Bo Anderson made themselves available, but were feeling the effects. Jockey Bjorkland, Alan McLaren returned to the defence, but they hadn't played a lot of football recently. I think it's McLaren certainly hadn't, and Ali McCoist would be the Rangers captain on this evening. Celtic's handicap was self-inflicted. They kept Pierre Van Hooijdonk on the bench because there was this contract negotiation played out in public. They were pretty furious actually about some of the comments he was making in the public domain. But given how much they needed to win this, Andy, and I think they needed to win. A draw keeps it at, all things being equal, 5 points. I just don't think they've got it in them to claw that back. If you get it to 2, well, it really is game on. You can't leave. You manage the situation, do you not? You get something out your player. He'll come on and he'll actually change the game a wee bit when he does come on. But this is a nonsense. Rangers are reeling. We've got players, blood and snotters everywhere. You've got to go for the jugular, no?
Looking back, it's an astonishing decision by Celtic and by Burns, and you wonder what's going on in the background, whether it's influence from above that's causing it. Because at that point, it was obvious who we were wary of. It was DeCanio, Hooijdonk, and probably Andreas Thom, the 3 top players. But especially him, especially Van Hooijdonk, and he was a wee bit of a talisman for them. So the fact that he's not there, in the context that we are reeling for flu and we're missing Laudrup, for example, apart from the rest of them, it's pretty astonishing looking back. And I didn't really appreciate it until I started looking through this in preparation. So, and I think the game kind of swung a wee bit towards Celtic once he came on as well. I mean, even looking at highlights, you can see a couple of great chances he had. So it is an incredible decision to be made because, as you say, if they draw, they're still alive, but it's a tough ask. If they win, we go back to talking about momentum. There's a fair chance that momentum would really put us under more pressure to the point where, anything can happen, collapses can happen here. So, astonishing decision given the context.
Especially who we've got to play only 48 hours later with the flu thing. We'll get to that in a minute. Jorg Alberts will be, I think, synonymous with this fixture in his time at Ibrox. He had missed some good chances at Parkhead. It wasn't only Van Vossen. He did not miss this. I mean, it's right into the side of Stuart Kerr's net. It's touching nearly 80 miles an hour. Everything just set up perfectly. I think Martyn Tyler says he's becoming getting a bit of a reputation as a set piece specialist. The fans are shouting Alberts. It was again an early blow, John, like at Parkhead. Noses in front, right? Well, what are you going to do? Well, what they did was bring Van Hooijdonk into the fray, and it did change the game. Gorham has to deny him again. He has to deny David Hanna before Paolo Di Canio finally beats him from close range. And we're on our feet. We are tired, and Gascoigne is spent. I mean, he's ill. They've got everything in their grasp, right? Rangers are on their heels. And they had looked all energetic. They had looked like they had a lot of verb when they were chasing that glorious lost cause that we've spoken about so much. And this tightened immediately. Celtic did nothing once they equalised. Once the opportunity was there. And this whole narrative of the Burns, these 2 years, I think is crystallised by this night. Crystallised even further, John, when Smith makes a very attacking substitution. He brings McCoyson, Murov, Bo Anderson and Van Vossen, 2 strikers up there, and Burns changes as well. He replaces Alan Stubbs with Andy Tom. When Celtic's shape was fine, there was nothing wrong with Celtic's shape, but he sees Smith make a decision. He has to counter that. He just doesn't trust in what he's got. And, David Hanna moving back into defence, and lo and behold, it's an absolute disaster. That head tennis, I don't know what they're doing. Alberts pounces, even Bo Anderson can't miss from there. And obviously we get another one a few minutes later, and Smith down the trackside. I think this is Tommy Burns in microcosm, as well as Smith, the opportunist. Just perfectly opportunistic.
I think it's... When you look at it, it's, as I said, they're good at chasing, but as soon as they get in a position where, right, this is your chance to go ahead, they don't know what to do. And I'm not sure that Burns it's a reaction to what Smith does. I think Smith is a necessity. But definitely I think McCoy's and Moore are spent, and those are probably the 2 most knackered to come off or whatever, and that's why I go on. But I think Burns is pure Celtic, man. It's right. We'll take off a defender and we'll throw on an attacker. Charge.
He wouldn't do that unless Smith did, though. I don't believe he does that. It's having to react to immediately almost to something that changes in the game. I just don't think he's just not calm.
No, I think he would still do it. It might have taken a bit longer, but as it was going at 1 each the last 10 minutes, you watch the way attacks unfold all through this season in the games. Theirs is always frantic, frenetic, pinball wizard stuff in the box, things pinging about. Ours is all about our top players creating clear-cut chances, which sometimes we take, sometimes we don't. There's no... We're ruthless, a hot knife through, a Celtic butt defence. They are cavalry charge stuff the whole time. Even when they're on top, it's not because it's a controlled, steady pressure of just exerting things slowly but surely. It is the charge of the Light Brigade stuff. It just always feels that way. And when they get to 1 each, we're dead in our feet. And I was sitting there and watching the Govan, you're thinking, this could get tough. But after 5-10 minutes, you're thinking, they don't know what to do. It might end up 1 each, and you didn't necessarily see we were going to win. But then we do make Alberts takes the opportunities that are presented to create the chances for Anderson. He just knocks them away. But they're calmly taken. There's none of what's going on up the other end where they have collectively, from manager all the way down, they have lost the plot. They're on speed or whatever. It's it's lovely to watch afterwards. Don't get me wrong, but it's gobsmacking that a professional team, in a 2-horse race should approach it like this every single time. He doesn't try a different approach, I don't think, emotionally at least, any time he plays us. It is all out there. And I reckon even if he beats us at one point, they'll be so exhausted from the emotion, the adrenaline rush and everything else, that there'll be a child who's ate all the selection box on Christmas Day, Boxing Day, they're completely out of the game. And they struggle to cope with the games after the Old Firm just as much as they struggle to cope with Old Firm games. In fact, it's probably worse, I think, at that point. But it's a stunning game, and it just is a microcosm of everything that's happening. Celtic are running about. They should be on top. They have opportunities, but then they don't take them, and they don't know what to do. And Rangers, when they get a hold of the game, control it and score. It's quite a simple game, actually.
Andy, this is the birth of Alberts, isn't it? The legend and his place in the hearts of the Rangers support. It was getting there. He'd had a good start. It wasn't as if he was, making up a lot of lost ground, but, you have to do it in these fixtures, and he would go on to make his mark time and time again.
I think, Albert's denies the fans for day one. We knew we had a player because, if you remember when he first started, he was playing at left back and he was totally more than competent to the point where we're like, this guy's a great left back. I wonder what he's like midfield. But, that goal's totally ingrained in my mind because I don't think I'd ever really seen anything like it for a Rangers player before. We'd seen David Cooper's free kick in the Scotland Cup final, stuff like that, but there was something about this goal, Martyn. I was in the third row of the Copeland. That was where my season ticket was, at the main stand side, and so I'm right behind it, and it was like an exocet missile, and it was just so true. I don't think I've ever seen a ball struck as low and as hard as that for such a distance. It was iconic, really. When you think about it now, it's an iconic goal, and it stands alone. And he went from strength to strength, but I think he was made of the right stuff, and we're talking about focus and concentration at the right times. This game kind of epitomised it. Every single one of the players had to stand up and be counted, and it's easy to take it for granted because we know Albert's now, but at that point in time, he's a German player playing in Scotland in his first season. He's not even halfway through the first season in Germany, in Scotland, after playing in Germany in his career. It would be easy for a guy like that to be a peripheral figure in games like this, games of this magnitude. We've seen it before. So you said it announced them, it didn't half, and it was live on Sky, and I think the word that Andy Gray used was awesome. It was awesome.
Well, this should have been the footballing story the next day about how Burns got it wrong, how Smith got it right, the resilience of this Rangers team with the Vicks Vapor Rub all over it. Of course it wasn't. Why the ref in hell was this goal disallowed, screamed the Sun, for some reason missing the question mark. As we know, in between those Bo Anderson strikes, another Celtic surge, another Celtic attack led to Georges Cadet find himself in, let's say, too much space in the box, and he hooked the ball past Gorham, seemingly to level the match up, but the linesman's flag went up, of course. The distraction of the decision, Andy, the linesman's personal background, and how this moment, among all the thousands of footballing decisions taken over the season, the millions that were not taken, was what it all boiled down to. Cadet still talking 20 years later, that, very important goal for us. It would have set us up to continue challenging Rangers, blah, 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 blah. Something I missed, I have to be honest, in my last book, and I got a nice review on Amazon. Someone said they really enjoyed it, but I can't believe he doesn't know that goal wasn't ruled out for offside. Of course it wasn't ruled out for offside. I'd completely forgotten. There's no way it could have been ruled out for offside. The flag would have went up earlier if that was the case. Cadet's hand goes back, he jerks back pretty quickly, and I think McBride believes the ball to have been controlled by the hand. The standard of picture quality these days, or compared to these days, is pretty terrible, to be honest, and the angle doesn't really give us that, but it was ruled out for that infringement. So that narrative of offside seemed to have stuck. But that's where all the focus was, Andy. Despite the fact that a draw was no use to them. It was no use to them at all.
But it's ever lost, Martin. I mean, they're always going to be clutching at straws, and I think their argument probably would be that, you know, they score that goal and it's back to momentum. So you could call this episode momentum. It was a decision which would raise eyebrows if it was against us, but equally, I can see why the linesman thought it was a handball. The conspiracy thing doesn't hold water when, you know, what we're about to talk about in terms of the flu epidemic comes into play, because if there was a conspiracy, then that would have been an acid test for it. So you're right, but Martin, I mean, the draw would have kept them alive, but it would have been a big ask for them. But as you say, they weren't doing what they should have been doing against a very depleted Rangers team. If they couldn't take us to task on a day like that, they didn't deserve to win any title. So it's clutching at straws, but it's classic Celtic. And I mean, we all know, never, what's the saying, always cheated, never defeated, and that just epitomises it.
It was ever thus, John.
Yep.
Yeah, still not convinced if they'd been given, and I do believe it. I remember watching it at the time. I don't know what it was given for, but I think the ref's whistle goes before he hits the ball. Whether that impacts
the flag's immediate. The flag is on
That-
contact on Cadet's control of the ball, and again, this right hand jerks back as if shit. I get that out of the way, and then the flag is up. It's not the header, the knockdown. I think it's from Phil O'Donnell, from McNamara's cross. So it isn't offside. I don't think it's been. It wasn't offside, but I don't think the flag was up for offside either. I think he's felt that he's handled the ball.
I think so, and I think the whistle. I have recollection that watching it many times, but I wouldn't have put it past us to go went up the park and still scored that third goal, because actually did they create a chance between one each and us going 2-1 up?
No,
I don't recall. I mean, if they were that's down to them. It's they were fine when they were down, and actually I'm quite happy when they're like that, because again it goes back to they're unwilling to look in the mirror and see where their deficiencies are. Therefore, when you don't take that responsibility, you're just going to keep repeating the same old mistakes. And therefore, I'm quite happy if they want to wrap themselves in that blanket. It only becomes a problem when our fans fall into the trap or begin to also believe it. But really, if they want to blame Masonic conspiracies and this and that, the big thing, as you say, should have been Celtic went to one each. They had the momentum. What happened? That Rangers are dead on their feet and they created absolutely nothing. That is actually the story of this game.
it
How
is just
did they
yeah.
go? But if they don't want to talk about that and they're unwilling to address it, which means they're unlikely to make changes to fix it, I'm absolutely delighted.
Yeah, and sadly they did, but yeah, not at this moment in time. 48 hours later, then Rangers took to the field at Easter Road with only 4 fully fit players: Snelders, Shields, McInnes and Cleland. 28 Rangers players had the flu. We asked the Scottish Football League to postpone the game, but we were forced to play on. Smith later said, well, one of the big stories around this time was Rangers and Celtic and some of the other teams fielding weakened sides at the end of the season, really, when there's nothing else to play for, maybe get a cup final on the horizon, and teams, understandably, maybe scrapping for relegation, would say, well, one of the rivals is getting to play Rangers or Celtic with a real free hit because they've got, you know, the kids out or whatever. And Smith said, like, I understand all that, but presumably there won't be any issue now because they're forcing us to play a weakened team here. It really, really was a bit ridiculous. And when Hibs took the lead in only 8 minutes, I think a few of us might have been saying, well, the exertions of this week might just be too much. But Bo Anderson equalised quickly, and then Albert scored from the penalty spot late and brought down Laudrup in the second half. 2 weeks From Tynecastle to Easter Road, Rangers have shown brilliance and resilience in equal measure. 13 goals in 4 games. John, this was a Rangers side who were able to be expansive or compact whenever the situation demanded, and it's that adaptability, that very Smithian adaptability that's required to win championships that Celtic just did not have. This is not a game, I think, that's talked about anywhere near enough, because especially with that early goal conceded, it's a remarkable, resilient comeback.
It is. It goes back to what I said. This team at this time are able to produce when they are under pressure, and it's almost like impossible is nothing. You know, the harder the challenge, the higher they kind of raise, if you like, the levels of application or even skill, depending on what's required to get the job done. And therefore, when people doubt them, they are at their best at this moment. And it's only when you go to the well one last time and discover it's not there that suddenly it's not there. But at this point, there just is a general belief. You guys are better placed to comment because you live in Scotland at this point. But I think subconsciously a lot of the support know it. Because of the 9 in a row or whatever and all of that hype, which I never liked anyway, achieving something they'd done never appealed to me as a goal. But because of all that pressure and stress, that obviously impacts on your objectivity. But subconsciously you're thinking, this team's got it. And simultaneously you're thinking, across the city, they haven't got it. And this is just a team that's on its knees again, like the last 15 minutes against Celtic, and rolling up the sleeves, goal down. Okay, what we got to do to win here, and I mean all along. I mean the following week we have a stunning result as well in relative terms, and then it becomes easy again. But as you say, you look at the grounds we've gone to over the past 6 weeks, and the results we're getting. They're fantastic. You beat Aberdeen 3-0 away, you beat Hearts 4-1 away, and you beat Hibs at Easter Road 2-1 when you're, half a team. It speaks volumes of the team at this point. And to think objectively, and there are stumbles, that we still had an angst or an anxiety given what we've seen so far this season with us and with them. Just goes to show what the pressure cooker and the psychology across the west of Scotland was doing to people.
Andy, this period that we've just looked at, big wins at Tynecastle, Pittodrie at home to Celtic, but that Easter Road one, Rangers fans love a Rangers team like that.
Well, it's what I was talking about earlier on about, when they go and get stuff, you cannot win. I mean, we've spoken over this whole series about some seasons when it was a relative canter due to the quality of opposition. But this year, there's been adversity, big adversity, probably none more so than this period of time, these weeks, where you've got, what did you say, 24 players unavailable with the flu. I mean, even with
some were available. 28 players had the flu. We didn't play with 4 players. It should be said. Only 4 players that played that day were actually fully fit. So, some couldn't make it out of their bed. Some had to play, but were shattered. Yeah, the flu's tough. By the way, it's not a cold, right?
No, that would have been good 4 players. But these kind of results are what win you the league when you look back, because you dig deep and you make something happen when all odds are against you. To go Easter Road at any time is a tough gig, none more so when you've got this kind of pressure on us, and that cannot be understated when we're talking about this programme and trying to paint a picture. The pressure, there was no enjoyment. We've spoken about this, there was very little enjoyment, there was just relief at different points. And again, you're going to Easter Road thinking, Christ, what happens if we get beaten? It goes back to negative and positive momentum. What can happen? You're thinking so far ahead, and the fear of loss is probably far, far greater than the anticipation of winning, to be quite honest with you, because the negative is the magnitude is so big that if we don't do this, then it's just 8 years, 9 years doing the Swanee. So to win games like this, you're right, it is fairly underrated, and they get swept away because we remember the Old Firm games as if they're the ones that made a difference. Of course they make a difference, but it matters not a jot if you can't go to Easter Road and 2 days later and do that.
It was something else. 4 more goals pretty soon after against Aberdeen. Bo Anderson, 9 goals in 8 games, by the way, get another double. Game was marred by jeers from the Aberdeen support, songs about the Ibrox disaster during the minute silence for the Rangers legend George Young, who died 2 days before, age 74. None of this was new. There's a growing tendency to, I guess, rebel against decency that started to become prevalent around this time through a lot of British supporters, including Rangers, who had disrupted the silence from Matt Busby a couple of years before. But this event, again, maybe because it's on live, it's on STV that Sunday afternoon, prompted some to suggest, including the Aberdeen chairman Ian Donald and a local fan and sociology academic, Dr. Richard Giulianotti, that a more Mediterranean show of reflective affection, i.e. a minute's applause, was more in keeping with the nature of a noisy sport. Something in the logic, but I think far more of an expedient need to cover up this lack of respect. But if anyone wants to know where this trend in Britain for a minute's applause, where it started, I think it's there. This claustrophobia, though, never far from the surface despite this very good run. The nature of the season, I don't think either side, it was likely for them to put a huge string of wins together. It's too much of a kind of pressure cooker. But despite this great run, 10 wins in 11, 2 against Celtic, good comfort zone. Rangers controlled this rearranged game at Rugby Park, but maybe guilty of being too over-elaborate. Stung early in the second half. Colin McKee put Kelly in front. Gascoigne rescued a point. McCoy should have got all 3, but it was the first wobble in 8 games. The gap down to 6 points. But reading the thoughts of some supporters, you could be forgiven for thinking we were back level or behind. Again, the Gub wants the whole squad fined. He says, once again, the collective attitude has to be questioned. Don't they want their own wee personal piece of immortality which comes with winning this season's league? I'd hit them in their pockets. The best run of form of the season comes to an end with a draw and an otherwise fine performance, and the response is the players should be fined. This was not a normal season, Andy. It was 9 years squeezed into 9 months, and so often it was just intolerable. It was a season where I think final whistles induced relief rather than joy, and it's, well, one more chalked off.
It is the Gub we're talking about right enough.
You get it in the phone ends, and you get it in some of the other ones, but yeah, I know what you mean.
I mean, the Gub, for those listening, the Gub was a nom de plume of somebody in follow that was fairly influential, and amongst these many great points, there were sometimes some unhinged things, and I suppose this was emblematic of the extremes that we were thinking, because folk would read that and nod their head in agreements. Yeah, they should be fine and go to cash for kids and this kind of stuff. It was extreme reactions to extreme times. There was no quarter given by the support. This is the thing. So we're all in it together up to a point. And that point is as soon as we look as if we're not going to do it, and then all hell would break loose. We've seen echoes 2 years ago with the Rangers Celtic 10-0 thing, and it went wrong for Celtic. And I'm not saying we'd been throwing barriers in Edmondson Drive, but there was always potential for bloodlust if this had went wrong for Rangers. So that's an interesting article you've dug up there, Martyn, because it kind of drives to the point of sugar and shite. If it's going well, then great. Yeah. If it's not, or even hints at not going the way we want it, it doesn't take much to press the panic button.
There would be panic buttons, maybe a wee bit more understandable to press in a few weeks, and we'll maybe discuss on next week's show. I get that. Just not after an incredible run that we've just talked about. But again, it shows that there's so much tension just being very thinly repressed. Another win followed on the Saturday after, Rangers returning to winning ways at Fir Park, but it wasn't the manner of the 3-1 victory that had fans excited, and despite Gascoigne, Laudrup and Alberts all being very impressive, it was the substitute appearance of the new Rangers signing. Smith repeated his South American adventure in the winter, but he'd better fortune with the Home Office this time. One might say that's where his luck ran out. Sebastian Rozental was first mentioned way back in November, around the time that Kenny Dalglish was rumoured to be helping Rangers out as a kind of casual sofa scout. But it was thought that Sunderland, who were a club on the up at the time, and perhaps Manchester United might be ahead of the chasing pack. It should be noticed that Rozental had scored 24 goals in Chile that season. He was 20 years old. He was featuring for the national team as they were qualifying quite impressively for the World Cup in France 1998. And South America was becoming a fashionable place to shop for British clubs now that the Bosman kind of limitations had been released. You have Juninho, Emerson, Branco arriving in Middlesbrough, Faustino Asprilla arriving in Newcastle over the last year, and Smith and Knox didn't hang about. They watched them pretty closely, and then they got a deal agreed for £4 million before Christmas. Again, dependent on the work permit. They were all taken, as they were with Jardel. But East Fife's decision to terminate the contract of their Trinidadian international Craig Denham freed one up, and the chance that Rangers would have killed for 12 months before was grabbed this time around. How well was he suited to Scottish football? This was debatable. Roy Hodgson, who was then manager of Inter, and more specifically of the Chilean hero Ivan Zamorano, thought it was a bargain. I know a lot about Rozental. People in high places are extremely optimistic that he can go on to become the next big thing from South America. He's highly rated because Zamorano is an absolute hero in Chile, and people there are talking about Rozental being a new version of him. He must be some player to be even mentioned in the same breath as Zamorano. Meaning well, but maybe slightly clumsily, he continued, contrary to what some people believe, Chileans are a very tough race, and I'm sure that will help Rozental because everyone knows the Scottish League is a tough one. Rangers may well have got themselves a great signing. Our old pal Jerry McNee was not convinced. He claimed to have spoken to Alex Ferguson about United's interest, and was told the boy's superb physique, but he's not an out-and-out striker and is not the answer. But McNee's bigger issue, it would appear, from his growing weekly frustration at this saga in his column, was with the continent of Rozental's birth. South Americans appear to be trouble. Failed to settle, could be disruptive, spent too much time on flights in order to keep up with their international commitments at a time, listeners, that were not quite as synchronised as they are now. So South American players would miss British League games to go in and play in qualifiers. McNee says, bearing in mind the problems foreigners are causing British clubs, is this Chilean Catholican worth the fuss? That was a question which he opened his column with on December 15th. Similarities in tone to Alan Sugar's comments at the start of the year, that Carlos Kickaball, notorious comments from Sugar, who was of course the chairman of Spurs at the time. And McNee's wordplay is also worth noting here. Rozental was signed from the Santiago club, Universidad Católica. The joke at the time being that only Rangers could go to a Catholic university team in a Catholic country and find the only non-Catholic player. Rozental was, of course, Jewish. But usually so po-faced on the issue of sectarianism in the west of Scotland that perhaps shines a wee light into his whole provocateur shtick. In the end, though, McNee was correct about Rozental, but maybe not in the way he imagined. He looked bright at Fir Park. He was involved in that third goal that killed it off, that Gascoigne scored, and then him and Bo Anderson got a start against St Johnstone Ibrox the following week in the Scottish Cup. Some were speculating, is this the future of the Rangers forward line? Because, as I said, Bo Anderson's strike rate at the minute was absolutely shit hot. They got a goal apiece in that first half, but as he came off, his face was a scowl. He's looking up to his family in the main stand instead of beaming with joy. Early in the match, he'd been challenged on the side of the knee by one of the St Johnstone players. He wasn't keen to come off that early, and the Rangers' treatment amounted to spraying his leg and being told to run it off. He played on, he scored, of course, then he got taken off at half-time. Rangers expected it to be minor. They allowed him to travel to South America for Chile's altitude preparations for the match in Bolivia. They said he's not fit, ruled him out. He flew back to Glasgow, and then his first session back broke down completely. Surgery was required after only 58 minutes of football. And John Waltersmith's struggle to plan for the retirement of Ali McCoy continued. Just can't catch a break with these things.
Yeah, but it's... you got to look at, who knows if it impacted or whatever, but the lack of, professionalism on the medical side or whatever you want to say, but him going off. I mean, it was a joke amongst supporters, certainly amongst the guys, knew that we were the only team that if somebody pulled a hamstring, we told them to run it off for 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, we just didn't look after our players, or didn't appear to, and this being a prime example, in a way which you would have thought we should. You know, if somebody's hurt their knee, you don't take them off, give them the wee magic sponge or the updated magic sponge, and then you send them off in a flight to halfway around the world. They send him back, and then he breaks down. I mean, it's just depressing, isn't it? I mean, because Netsov we were getting used to this whole, you know, was it Ross Hall or whatever was the private hospital? We had our own private medical wing for people with dodgy knees, because it was just depressingly repetitive. And I don't think you could blame it on training per se or whatever, but the lack of professionalism, and I think we're still in cricket pitches at this point, so you're jumping in minibuses, you know, these warm downs and everything. Just adds up. It's unlucky, but I think all the warning signs are there, as we've been discussing the past few weeks, seasons, that side of the club is not at the level which it should have been. Let's be honest. You know, we've talked about the drinking culture and everything else, but there's all this medical stuff which we just seem to ignore. I mean, it was back to the 60s and 70s or the 50s or even before of, you know, there is a badge of honour in running through brick walls, and if, you know, that Monty Python, you know, the guy's got his legs cut off, the night with the legs cut off, that was Scottish football, and we admire that. I don't know, it doesn't add up, and I think even if he was unlucky, we were guilty of not being professional enough in that area during this period.
No, for sure. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how many British clubs would have taken him off immediately after that challenge. It is fairly innocuous. He does run it off, and he takes his goal superbly well. He's not shown any great signs. Perhaps even the precaution at half-time is quite forward-thinking. Why we sent him to Bolivia is maybe to be discussed, but there is an element of bad luck here, Andy. We were all excited about him. Again, he has scored a lot of goals, and he is seen as Zamorano's understudy stroke replacement when he finally retires. This just feels so typically Rangers now. Kind of going back to, I guess you could go back to Colin West, but Kuznetsov, I guess, is the one that springs to mind.
It was a very exciting signing, because there's unknown quantities there, and you're going on word of mouth, and the word of mouth was, as we know, a top South American talent. It excelled at that Junior World Cup tournament. You know, the names that have been named linked to him were significant. And he's got that look. He plays with socks down or halfway down his legs. He's got the long hair. I'm surprised that was Alex Ferguson said about his physique, because his physique was kind of chunky.
Although you would never tell.
Chunky was the word I would use.
Yeah. You could hardly tell under that Rangers strip that season, which it had plenty of room, shall we say. It was baggy.
Yeah, which was good for me at the time. But you spend £4 million on a player, which is a lot of money for us now, never mind then. And you've waited for him, because this wasn't a quick signing, as I recall. I think we had to wait, and it was like waiting for a Christmas present. And there's a lot of chat around him. I remember at that time the internet was just starting, and at university I'm emailing folk from Chile to ask him about this player, and they're telling me he's a sensation and all the rest of it. So it kind of beggars belief that we were having this kind of investment in what is, I don't want to call them, collateral or class them alongside plant and machinery, but you're buying what is value here, and then we don't take care of them at all. And as you say, the magic sponge and the spray was about the extent of it, and then you get up and walk around on it. Whereas you look at it today, a player doesn't get off the ground until they've had their knee flexed and everything else with a doctor and a physio around about them. There's a shocking neglect of the players and the investment. And And it's kind of heartbreaking as well, because in the flashes that we've seen of him, I mean, he came on at Motherwell and he didn't do that much, but he looked tidy enough, and he hit that kind of instinctive long pass for the second goal, I think it was, on the Loudon, that's right, and it created a great break. And then he scored a great goal, great finish against St Johnstone, very early doors. It was kind of heartbreaking to have that ripped away for you again. No doubt it was heartbreaking for him as well to see his career with Rangers good in the pan after 20 minutes.
His career in general,
but, aye, well, this is it. Well, I mean, he came back and he made a wee cameo now and again for Advocat, but I remember watching him, believe it or not, in a Love Street Reserve game, some cold December night with Negri, believe it or not. So you've got a front of Negri and Rozental. And I remember what a shame, what a tragedy that his career has went this way. But if you're looking at it from pure mercenary, cynical point of view for Rangers, what a lot of wages and what a lot of costs and what a lot of missed opportunity there for us, because we didn't look after our assets, basically. That's it. That's looking back in the news, long and short there.
But Andy, what was a £4 million signing to a club that were now swimming in money? What was the loss of one international striker when another one could just be around the corner? On the 22nd of January, in between Rozental's 2 appearances that season, David Murray sold 25% of his shares in Rangers Football Club to the Bahama-based East London exile Joe Lewis for £40 million. Now, Lewis was the real man and the real money behind Planet Hollywood and Hard Rock Cafe, not Schwarzenegger and Willis. He'd recently bought Arnold Palmer's Isleworth Golf Club for over $20 million, upon which he had a house. Quite a few golfers had houses there. One, in particular, described by the Herald as the new golf sensation, Eldrick, in inverted commas, Tiger Woods. This sale is sensational. It was sensational. It seems sensational now, never mind then. It values Rangers at £160 million, and it provides Smith with a transfer budget that even he has never contemplated before. This investment, other commercial deals coming in that summer of '97. You're talking about having £55 million available. Murray talked about clearing the £60 million overdraft, working on a proper training facility. John mentioned we're training a cricket ground at the moment. And even a hotel. We started talking about a hotel at the stadium around this time. Chelsea were doing similar as well. But the majority would be on players. Interestingly, there's an EGM in February to ratify the investment at the concert hall. That Murray said the club had to be smarter in this new Bosman market, that maybe wages rather than eye-catching transfer fees might be more of a deal breaker. By this point, Rangers had already confirmed the signing of Tony Wiedmer for the following year, and had all but confirmed their concrete interest in the Sweden captain Jonas Tern, who are both available on a free contract. In the April, young Rino Gattuso would join that list. A lot of talk at this time about clubs floating publicly, and Murray felt that this was immoral, actually. They were doing it really in order to upgrade the stadium as quickly as possible. Murray felt there was only 4 clubs in Britain who could sensibly do it, but he felt Rangers were on the right course currently. He said, "This business we've passed today gives us a balance sheet second to none. That is not going to be the case with many other clubs in Britain, where fundraising is based on takeovers and buyouts. I think some of this is morally wrong, and some of it is a house of cards that will collapse." Now, Lewis's group, ENIC, the English National Investment Company, put 2 directors on the Rangers board, one of whom was Daniel Levy, of course, later chairman of Tottenham, but crucially demanded no extra control. Murray said, "Some other institutions made proposals to us which put unbelievable restrictions on dividend policy, management policy. We have run Rangers with flair, and that is why we're successful. We have a short chain of command. We make decisions on our feet as we go along. If we want to buy a player, Walter comes to me, we have a meeting, and it's decided in 2 minutes. So, in other words, Murray would not do a deal like that if that authority, autonomy, some might say, was taken away. These words, gentlemen, would soon come to feel incredibly dated and ironic, but at the time, this is a huge blow to the Scottish game, certainly to Celtic, who have shown patience, steady progress off the pitch. And just when it seemed like Rangers were on the pitch, having a team that's growing old together and is creaking, Walter Smith's now got the best part of $40 million to rebuild. This is like 86 all over again. only you've got a club already with that inbuilt sense of self-assurance and dominance kind of firmly established. Also poignant at this time is another story. 2 weeks before, the John Lawrence Glasgow Limited went into receivership with debts between 15 20 million quid. The man who made this possible, who got the ball rolling all those years ago, in huge trouble as Rangers appear to be going into the next stratosphere. It's an incredible amount of money, and although fans at the time rightly caveated any praise for Murray with the reminder that he'd put no personal money of his own into Rangers, he only gave it directly to Marlborough, they knew and celebrated his ability to convince other rich men to give up theirs. He was peerless in that regard. Murray's still talking about European Super League at this time. In December, they assured listeners on Radio Clyde that Rangers will be at that party. There were rumours that Rangers were trying to buy AFC Bournemouth as a way into the English League. Celtic were certainly looking to do similar with Wimbledon. But we certainly had the money to make this kind of wider impact. But I have to ask, singular investments like this, as spectacular as they are, can't have been a sustainable bulwark against the increase in television revenue that the big leagues were creating. Europe, I think that ship has sailed, but what it should have done, John, is assured domestic security for a generation, if of course the money was used wisely. And perhaps there were signs there already that it wasn't. The decision to offer a big deal to Jonas Tern, perhaps a warning that Ibrox was no longer a home to sharp and analytical thought. At only 30 years old, he was highly regarded in Serie A, but he was leaving Italy for a reason, and it was the same reason that 2 years later his career would be over. His knees were done. So even with new blood that we're going to get, perhaps the signs were there, hidden by the accounts and all the rhetoric, that this was still a club for those maybe on the wane. Make sense of this Joe Lewis investment, because it seems wild now, never mind 25 years ago.
Well, it's not an investment in isolation if you look back at what Ennick or Joe Lewis was up to. He was buying or investing in clubs all across Europe. With a quick look, I think AEK Athens, Slavia Prague, ultimately he would go into Spurs. I mean, the fascinating thing, and I'm sure somebody will pick you up, so I better say it, is Murray didn't sell 25.1% of Rangers. What he did allow was the share capital to increase and the share premium such that they got 25.1% of the club. There's two stunning things. One, probably less stunning in hindsight, in that Murray blew it all. And recklessly, you would have to argue, and it takes another 4 or 5 years before Auchenhowie's opened, or is it 3? It's 2001ish. It's just when Advocat's going, so it's about 4 years away or so, which should have been the priority. If you look, and I get the thing about Tern, but really all our big signings from post Trevor Steven, you would say, are risks in one way or another. They're either people coming back from injury, or they're people from initially behind the Iron Curtain, and then it's going to be South America. We are no longer competing at the top table, so of the complete England or that kind of level of international. So the real visionary is looking and saying, well, how do we make sure that we're picking up the best of the rest, identifying the hot prospects all across the world and bringing them here and look after them? And as you say, the medical thing should have been another thing that's upgraded, even to make sure that conditioning, etc. And it's just, but none of us were really thinking at the time, because it was 40 million. It's going to put us miles ahead of Celtic, who still haven't finished their stadium, I don't think. I think
and
still
can't keep the striker who's going to Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, he's $7,000. Let's face it, he was probably the only one in their team who we would have been delighted to have if we'd have signed Geert van Hooijdonk. He would have been an absolute fantastic fit into that McCoy's replacement. and what could he have done? And he had that kind of mental attitude, mental strength. Might be selfishness, but I think he would have been fine, or more than fine, in a winning team. And actually, in a dominant team, he would have been a real dominant personality. But this is you said it's a one-off kind of thing. You got to, it's like an inheritance. It's like a grandfather's left you, this life-changing pot of money. It's a one-off. What do you do with it to make it last a generation, to invest it? And as we'll see in the coming weeks of this show, we just go and blow it on. I mean, I still can't believe how much we spend on transfer fees, etc. At this point. And I still can't believe, which is the real point I can't believe, is that Joe Lewis, the billionaire, and I think he is at this point.
He is, yeah.
Two guys on the board, and they aren't trying to bring in some kind of corporate governance, not in a restrictive way, but in a purely professional business way. Responsibility, exactly. And how they allowed that investment money just to be blown completely, it's stunning. And maybe they did learn it for Spurs, because I don't think they really... I don't think they make the same mistakes at Spurs that they did at Rangers, and look at the value of the relative two investments now.
Yeah.
Kind of indicative.
Didn't win anything, though. Andy, John's right, we will get into this. We'll get into 97-98 in the new year, and how well we use that money. The reasons we did need to go big, because Smith had allowed this team to grow old, and that therefore the summer of 97 did have to be big. There was just no other way out of that. But John's right, Lewis is ponied up an incredible amount of money. It'd be an incredible amount of money now, never mind 25 years ago, without conditions and without levers and whatever else. But does this not just tell you how trusted, respected David Murray was in February 1997?
I mean, it does, because the picture we have of David Murray now is certainly not the case then, because the voices of dissent were few and far between, I think is the truth. Because anybody, I think the context I should say set out first, Martyn, is that it's no like today. I said earlier on about you've not got Twitter, so the exchange of information is not there for the average Joe punter that we have now, where you can actually Google and look and listen to other people, and I go on Twitter and tell folk I think the accounts. The closest you had to that was a guy called Brock Stoker on Follow,
very good,
who would give you a breakdown of the accounts, and he would allude to, here's a couple of things we should be thinking about with regards Murray, and that's where the kind of knowledge that he hadn't put any of his own money in. I mean, that was a shock to people, because they're like, what do you mean he's not put his own money? Because the portrayal was, the narrative was that he was bankrolling Rangers because he's this kind of philanthropist, and we're enthralled to these types of characters at this point in time, because the Berlusconi, Tappi, we've spoken about them before, the charismatic millionaire, and so the requisite education and knowledge that we see nowadays amongst fans, given what's happened to your club, it just was not there whatsoever amongst the Rangers support. So to go back to your original question about David Murray, the perception of Murray was of a guy who A, we could trust, and B, was a winner and a shark. And we're coming out, we'll be up to 96, 97, so we're well out the yuppie years, but we're still in an era of consumerism and forward thinking. And even at that point, I think we all knew, how did he do this? So hold on, we've just taken 40 million off this guy. Now, this guy's a recluse. You get a picture of him walking off his yacht in the Daily Record. That was about it.
Pals with Desmond, wasn't it? They're the same kind of thing. He's in, well, they're both involved in investments, obviously, but they're kicking about the Bahamas and playing golf.
Yeah. And 40 million for him, and we've no sold the club. and the guy on the board has no say. How does that work? It was seen as a success and a kind of what, but it was always doomed for failure because the structure and Murray spoke about it there. We sit down for 2 minutes and decide whether we're buying a player or no. That's because there was no structure. There was no real due diligence. There was no corporate compliance. It was a one-man band, and it was David Murray, and that has its benefits, but it's more drawbacks over the longer term, which as we found out.
But as a support, we're enthralled to those benefits, though, aren't we? Because we're thinking that's dynamic. Look at Celtic. Look how long it takes for anything to get done over there. It's a wee bit quicker. In fact, it's a lot quicker now than it used to be with the old board, but it's still too slow. We've got the auteur, and what they say goes, just 2 men, go and get it done. Campbell, register that player. That's it. And we liked that dynamism. Let's not sugarcoat it. We absolutely did. It was quite the story, and how we used that at the time we will get into when we come back. But if it was still a club for players on the wane, then maybe none more so than its most famous player. Rozental wasn't the only injury worry in that St Johnstone Cup tie. Paul Gascoigne left the field with 9 minutes remaining due to a calf strain, but Walter Smith assured everyone that he'd be making the trip to Amsterdam that midweek. It would have been better for all concerned, I think it's fair to say, if he was allowed to rest up at home. Or even if Rangers hadn't bothered at all with the Sony Euro 6s, a six-a-side tournament featuring Rangers, Ajax, Liverpool and Milan, to formally open the new Amsterdam arena. Six-a-side being quite a Cruyffian dream, and he pushed it quite a lot. $200,000 for taking part, same again for winning it. Scant consolation for the loss of Gascoigne, injured his ankle in a collision with the Ajax goalkeeper Fred Grimm, and despite attempting to join up with England a couple of weeks later, they had a huge game at Wembley against Italy. It would keep him out for the best part of what was left of such a crucial season. And for much the same reason, Graham Souness had no time at all for the popular and much mythologised Tennant 60s in the 80s and early 90s. But Andy, I think this sense of prestige and status, look at the teams I've just mentioned, drew Rangers into an unnecessary risk with so much on the line this season, but we had to be part of this eye-catching circus.
Yeah, you've basically taken the words out of my mouth. This was about ego and being invited to a party. It speaks to David Murray's desire to be at the top table, something that's slipping away from us, if we're being honest. And it was I think it was televised on Sky, and it was something different. And it was an exciting concept, as something of a novelty. But in the middle of a 9-in-a-row season, I think you're looking at it and thinking, what? I hope none of our players get injured, and then it happens. Looking back now, it's like, well, who okayed this? But obviously, if you're going to a prestigious tournament and it's for Ajax's stadium, they're not going to allow you to send a youth team, are they? So it was a bit bonkers looking back, and I keep bringing it up today. But we've many issues with our club nowadays, but I don't think that would have been allowed to happen in a season of that importance nowadays. I just think we look after our players better.
It was just a frivolity, John, but it was really, really costly in the long run, certainly with Gascoigne. But why take these risks? Yeah, it is ego, isn't it?
I think it might also be belief and confidence. I think there is ego, and it's huge. And if you're wanting to be, and you're looking at the bigger picture, you want to be rubbing shoulders with these guys, then
you can't pass it up.
I think you can't pass it up. Plus, it shows a degree of arrogance that we're going to win the league. I mean, that is the other thing to take from it. As regards, I had to laugh when Andy says it wouldn't happen nowadays. What about Sydney? I mean, it's it can happen at any time. It's this one, the timing was wrong, but I kind of understood why. Never mind Murray's ego. I mean, and this isn't the Tennant Sixes is playing against Dundee and all of this. This is Ajax, Milan, Liverpool. You're one of 4 cream of the... this is us. This is us living our dream of being a European team, which actually most of us can see disappearing, and has disappeared, if we're being honest. But yeah, I think it's Max. I think there's ego, but I think there's a degree of arrogance in terms of we're winning this league. Which, was it misplaced or not? Well, you got to say we did. Spoiler alert: we did win it. Therefore, no, it wasn't. But it was unnecessary. But again, you could send. This isn't Gascoigne picking up an injury there. This is another instance of our medical staff sending a player on a plane to play in something completely unnecessary. And
yeah, Rangers can still be there, but you can just say Paul's picked up a calf injury. Yeah. We don't want to look at this. A really important season. Don't want to risk him. I'm really sorry. I know he's one of the kind of big stars, but he can't. But maybe it's in the contract. I don't know. Just how well Gascoigne dealt with that injury layoff, we will pick up in next week. But without him, there were stumbles. A bit of an insipid 0-0 draw with Hearts at home was made easier by a Celtic defeat at Tannadice, and then Rangers picked up the pace again. 2 comfortable away wins to Dunfermline and at home to Hibs. And with only 6 minutes gone at Pittodrie, Brian Laudrup, who was captain for the day, had put Rangers in front on the breakaway, and another big 3 points appeared to be in hand. Comfortable lead, Celtic always appearing willing to spill any advantage when they were presented. Rangers stopped pushing for more and were punished as a result. Tony Kumbari's equaliser was irritating. He had far too much time in the box to get a shot away in the first half. But Jamie Buchan's goal was the kind of thing that spooks a dressing room and a support. It was a pretty poor cross from the right that went straight into Gorham's hands with no pressure around him, and then somehow it was in the net. Whether it moved in the air, it was a blustery day up there that day, I was there, or he switched off is unclear, but it was the kind of thing that we thought only happened to Gorham in those early days. Now that kind of thing, Gorham, the absolute rock solid hero, was a total freak. Rangers did not need those kind of omens as injuries were beginning to mount once again. Craig Moore headed Rangers level soon after, but that was the end of the scoring, Andy. I remember being on the bus back that day. It was not a happy place. It was nervy. The gap's back to 5 points. Fans moaning again, despite what we know, and what we certainly know now, looking back. Cushion's always there. Celtic are impotent under pressure, but fans are saying, look, that this kind of form's going to blow the league. I don't know if I'd forgotten quite a bit of this day. Actually, I've forgotten just how bad that Gorham spell was, but I do clearly remember the mood of that bus all the way home.
It was a shocker for Gorham, but I think there was a lot of forgiveness immediately, because I think, you know, especially up at Pittodrie, some of the performances he'd put in were spectacular. So it was an aberration. We're back to, as I say earlier on, positive and negative things that happen that are blowing up 10 times bigger than they should be. So we would have had, 9 or 10 games left, Martyn. So you're into 5 points of difference. You've started to play Celtic once
away.
So that's why we're nervous, because I think it's not just the points, it's the momentum thing. The swing could be huge, because the mood swings amongst the fans were they affected what happened on the pitch. There's no question about it. So that was why it was so important to maintain positivity. And normally a 2-2 away up at Aberdeen, you know, they weren't that good a team back then, but
they're in third. You know, they're all right.
Well, they're better than I remember then, but even so, you know, 2-2 away at Pittodrie under most circumstances, you'd probably say, well, you know, we would take it. But it was just a momentum thing. The slightest chink spooked everybody, and it was hard to shake at all. There was no room for pragmatism.
No one was seeing the bigger picture. Well, I'm going to ask a man who probably was seeing the bigger picture, because he's detached and living outside of this chaotic, suffocating bubble. But John, I'm guessing you're saying, well, Celtic, they just aren't going to do the business, so we will be all right, despite the fact we're looking quite complacent now and again.
Well, there is an objectivity. I mean, you can't see in individual games, and for particularly the next game which you cover next week at Parkhead, you can't say you're 100% certain, because in life things can throw it up. But if you look at it objectively, there's nothing that adds up apart from a complete aberration that they're actually going to catch us and overtake us. And we're going to allow that to happen. There's just, as you said, we drop points and then they lose. And that isn't a one-off thing. That is a repetition. You'll cover what happens in the Scottish Cup and other games next week. You look what happens in that tournament this season, and that just reaffirms everything that's being said and everything that's happening. So objectively, you're looking at it and saying Rangers are the winners, pay out now. Emotionally, because you're so invested, I mean, even if we're 5 up with 2 minutes to play or something, you are worrying that what if they get a quick couple of goals and the ref plays 5 minutes, what happens? Because football is not an emotional thing that or supporting a football team is not a rational decision. It is an emotional one. And no matter what part of your rational brain is saying, well, this all adds up, ergo, that is going to be the answer. There is a degree of nervousness, but it makes a difference not being the west of Scotland, because the anxiety levels there are just amplifying. It's like an echo chamber. Everybody's bouncing off each other, and what starts, is it butterfly wings?
Yeah.
What starts as things really then explodes, and I'm so far away that the butterfly wings are just butterfly wings, and I don't even when I'm coming up, I'm not listening to Super Scoreboard. I'm listening to, it's probably David Mellor, reading the English papers with their view, Roddy Forsyth or whatever, in the Sunday Telegraph. I'm dealing with much more rational people on all levels, or generally, apart from when I'm at the games. And it is, but therefore I probably enjoyed this season more than most. I don't say I enjoyed it the most of this 9 in a row, but I didn't experience the levels of anxiety which you guys are describing quite well, I would say. It just wasn't there for me because I was nervous, I was anxious on specific games, but I couldn't see us not doing it. Or rather, I could not see Celtic doing it. I think to take it the other way,
yeah,
and be more accurate.
And that's very interesting, and it is another perspective. My memory of it, and it's affirmed by a lot of the stuff I've been reading back, is that everyone is just on edge. This might sound ridiculous to some of our younger listeners who've only experienced 1, maybe 4 league titles. This was not an enjoyable season. It was one to endure and get through because of that pressure, and you were always looking for someone to say, we might not be fine. But we were all in that same boat. And go back to that bus coming back, and it's folk just winding each other up by saying, we got a double header against them coming up. And lose both, and the momentum's back, and all of a sudden in your head, you're only 2 points in front, and then Christ knows what happened. And it was constant, and as I said, as Andy said, thank goodness for no social media. Gentlemen, we will leave it there. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, Martin. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Andrew.
Me man, it's going to be all right.
It is indeed, and the two of you will be back in a couple of weeks in a kind of finance special, really to explain how this revolution happened, how it was propelled, maybe where the mistakes started to appear for the future, and how Celtic did their business. We'll be back in a couple of weeks for that. Right, Rangers are starting to wobble, but worse was to follow, both in the treatment room and on the pitch. Of the 9 games of football left of season 1996-97, Rangers won 4 and lost the rest. If this was the winter in which a most precious lead had been built, it would be a spring whereby Rangers hung on to it for dear life. Now was not the time for beauty. it was the time for bottle. Football at its most basic and rudimentary. For Rangers, it was time to go back to basics. For Rangers, it was time to go back to the future. Until next time, bye for now.